I'm having another hang. I'm hanging with somebody I like, which is the only way that anybody on talk radio or television ought to do a show. But most of them don't have the good sense to get mad at the program director, the manager, and tell them to go screw themselves. Charlie Warner's here, famous Charlie Warner, having been a program director, manager, president of companies, and whatever else you got. Did you ever fire me?
No, I never did. I wish I had the opportunity to work for
you. Well, I guess I missed out, because I've been fired from, that every place except Cape Kennedy. I mean, I've had how many? I've had 40 jobs, 40 of them.
Well, I've been fired 7 times in my long career.
Yeah. So, but you don't work for anybody right now except yourself. Is that right, or am I wrong?
Well, I'm teaching at the new school. I teach in the media management program. It's a graduate program, and I teach 2 or 3 courses every year for them. And I've been doing that since 1997, and I really enjoy that. And before that, I was had an endowed chair at the University of Missouri School of Journalism. So. I've been a teacher longer than I've been in the media, but I love teaching.
Oh yeah, well you're great at it, man. My God, I love what you're doing, and I know a lot about it. But I want everybody to who doesn't know to catch up a little bit here, because I see my education has been through living with Jack Wayman, who founded the Consumer Electronics Association.
Right.
And he chained me to. The Consumer Electronics Association, which is now the CTA, because they took the T for technology.
Right.
And so that's where I go. I go to all of their events, and I go to the conferences, not to see the toys. The toys are the end result.
Right.
But the innovations. And so I know that when I come back, usually I'm all full of, I found this, I saw that, and then Charlie Warner's doing it. I'm saying, wait a minute. You didn't live with Jack.
Well, I try to keep up on things. In order to write my book on media selling, I have to keep up a little bit on the technology, but there's so much of it that it's just going so fast. And the other thing I try to keep up on is the media and journalism. And this has been a week of tectonic change.
Back up a little. Let me see what that T-shirt is. What do you got on there?
Oh, this is a Colin Kaepernick T-shirt.
San Francisco?
Well, yes. And I do it to honor him for his taking a knee and the fact that the whole country is taking a knee today because of what's going on.
Yeah. I try to stay out of that. I grew up in an all-black neighborhood, and I used to get beat up on the way to school. So I kind of I'm not interested in marching anymore. I did all this when I was a kid. See, I mean, I had this at the Boys Club in Buffalo, and I did the '60s marching, and now in an older age, I mean, I certainly want freedom, and I want people to be treated equally. I haven't changed that. But for marching and pushing for an agenda like that, my journey, yours is wonderful, incidentally, and yours is semi-political, as I understand it, although you didn't say it.
Right, absolutely.
I think it is. I think you have worked door to door for presidential election. I believe I can say that. You don't.
Oh, absolutely.
And my journey has been to try to, and you're going to laugh, I try to change the media.
Yes, I agree.
I figured, can I tell you a little? Well, go ahead.
And even though you say you're not political, you have always had a very diverse group of people on your talk show. I remember one night when I was on that I was there, and the great Yankee slugger, what was his name?
Was it Charles? I'm trying to think of which one. There have been several.
Well, his son was also played for the Yankees, was a great home run hitter. See, I'm 88 years old, so my memory is going. But anyway, this great black slugger, and we were waiting in the green room to go on, and we had this wonderful conversation. And you have always learned through the people that you talk to on your show. And that's where your education came from, and it's wonderful. And you've always been, colorblind in a sense with the guests that you have.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, that's what I mean. See, but it's no good to have a non-issue either, because then people think I'm indifferent or I don't care, which is indifference, which is not correct.
I know.
I mean, I'm too sensitive to want to get involved sometimes. You know what I mean? I have a big.
Oh, I think you're right. I think that's right. And the notion that you don't want to foist your opinions necessarily on your audience, and you do subconsciously through your actions.
Yeah, I belong to a parent group, and since my daughter went to school for troubled teens, which is actually for troubled parents, and we learned to change our behavior. Joe Papp started the school, and he years ago when he had a troubled son, and he was asked, by the schoolmaster. He asked the schoolmaster. He says, "How's my son doing?" And Michael Lusisto, the schoolmaster, he says, "Not so well." He said, "Why not, Joe?" And Joe says, "Well, Mike, come on, do something. What's not happening?" And Mike looked at him and he said, "Well, Joe, you're not changing.
Yeah.
And if you don't change, your son's not going to change."
Right. Exactly.
So he said, "I'm paying you to educate. I don't want to hear all that stuff. It's therapy." But they built the Tanglewood Mansion, and they built a school, and I'm still in the parent group. Well, so with people of color running the program right now. So, we had a touching conversation last night because everybody had to get honest about rich white people running a school that is ordained by black workers who actually have trained me. So,
exactly.
I wouldn't be here. I would be drugged from all my foolishness, and my daughter certainly would have died. I would have enabled her to death.
Right.
And the black dorm parent was the one who clued me in. He said, "You're killing your daughter. You're killing her." That's an honest conversation, isn't it?
That's a very honest conversation. And I think that we've always had honest conversations. And, over the years when you were on WOR at night, and I'd come down, a couple of times a year to talk, you always talked about what I thought were interesting ideas. And you weren't afraid to talk about a subject or bring up unusual, different subjects that were sort of beyond the pale. And so I think that your ability to get people to talk is wonderful. I think that may be one of your greatest strengths is your ability to ask questions and to get people to talk. Oh, so you're needed right now.
Thank you. I want to talk to you about something. I want to ask your opinion now. Okay. We've had a lot of women issues in the last few years have been more pronounced than ever. Sexuality been more pronounced than ever. Black, which is current and still lingering. But let me ask you this. What about age? Our ages, why are we getting screwed? Or not screwed, whichever way you look at it.
Well, it's interesting. The idea of ageism is not a topic. And, I think that's probably okay because we don't want to hang on and take jobs that younger people could do. I think one of the great problems in the education system today is tenure. When they give professors tenure and they can't fire them. And so what that does is that they keep their jobs, until they're in their 70s or 80s. And those are jobs that should go to younger people. And so actually, I don't mind not working. And I am working in the sense that I teach 2 courses every year, and that's enough work for me. And I write a blog called Media Curmudgeon and get my ideas out on that about the media. So it keeps me busy. But, old people should retire.
I love that. Oh boy, I love that. I had my friend was Rod Roddy, was the announcer.
Yeah.
He said, "You haven't touched the planet in 10 years. What do you care?"
No, but again, Joey, you continue to do what you're good at, which is connecting with people and asking good questions. And you're talking to older people and getting their opinions. And I think that's very useful. That's helpful, useful, productive. You're still productive.
Well, you and I have similar paths. We both are still interested. That's what they asked Einstein. They said, "You're a genius." He says, "I'm not a genius." And they said, "Well, how are you so smart?" He says, "I'm interested."
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Simply put.
Well,
remain interested.
It's interesting. There was Eric Schmidt, when he was chairman of Google, was interviewed by Reid Hoffman on a podcast, and he asked Eric, Google is famous for hiring people, having the best hiring process of any company in the country. And the Hoffman said to Eric, "What do you look for? What does Google look for when they hire people? You're so good at it." And he said, "Two things, curiosity and persistence."
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
You want to be curious. Continue to be curious. So at your age and my age, and we'll continue to be curious.
Yeah.
That's what it's all about, learning.
Now, we have had careers in broadcasting. Broadcasting is communication.
Yeah.
It's gone all over the place. With communication is in everything, in selling on to whether it's a refrigerator or a national broadcast. So we have evolved in broadcasting. You were manager and even president. You've had a great career in broadcast.
Well, thank you.
And you lived the whole length. You lived from David Sarnoff's dream till to watch the Nightmare. So how did we get out of listening to radio? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the media, television, radio, newspapers, magazines, changed completely. The business model changed completely with the disruptive innovation of the internet. And when it came along, nobody in the media had any concept about what would happen. And what it did slowly since 1996, and when I was at AOL in 1998, half the traffic to the internet went through AOL. And AOL had 51% of all of the digital revenue, and Yahoo had 49%, or just two companies. And so we said, oh, this is really cool. But the percentage of revenue, of total advertising revenue, was tiny at the time. And nobody could see that where we are today, that digital advertising is the number one advertising medium. It's about 15% greater than television revenue, and the internet destroyed newspaper advertising revenue and magazines, and it hurt radio. Radio, it really, in a sense, hurt the least. The radio listening is not down as much as television viewing, and its total revenue, advertising revenue, is not as far down, of course, as newspapers, which is down the most, or magazines, or even television. So radio is hanging in there, and particularly forward-thinking companies like iHeart, where iHeart is now the number one producer of podcasts. They are not a radio company, they're an audio company.
Right, so that's what I was getting at. Now, there is no radio, there's media, there's communications, there's electronics, but radio is AM and FM, towers.
Yeah.
And the AM is in Japan. They don't even have it anymore.
Right. Exactly.
And FM, now where is that going? Because I want to run this by you. I'm glad we're talking like this because you're the guy who answered. Tell me this. I just got excited. You know, I think satellite radio is not really radio. It's a subscription, but it's delivery by satellite.
That's right.
It's a signal. It's not towers. You know, as all I'm saying. It's not a property with a tower on it. So you got what the satellite does, and on XM and Sirius, when they were separate or together, they deliver a certain format for each channel. They have a different blend of music or design, right?
Yep.
Now, FM has also come to that with each format. They have one station that's hip hop and another one that's AOL or album oriented or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
Or there's no all Sinatra station anymore. But they have all these various channels now on a delivery system with towers. So that puts them actually in competition with the 600 channels that XM has, which they can deliver that quickly. So the economy's got to be off. Am I in the right trail here?
Well, yes, the XM and Sirius combined, and they're one company that's controlled by Liberty Media, which is John Malone, who was TCI Cable. And John Malone is one of the smartest guys in the business.
Okay.
And he was talking at one time, maybe in the last year, he was talking to iHeartRadio about buying iHeart. And so I think that's sort of inevitable that these big, huge audio companies will consolidate because they have to get rid of costs. So you have Cumulus that was in bankruptcy. iHeart was actually in bankruptcy and came out. Intercom. They all have their back office, and Sirius and XM also have their back office, and they'd be much better off if they combined somehow and became one big audio company. So I think that's going to happen.
Would you have thought of that when you were running at AOL? Would you have thought to?
Absolutely not.
No.
I would. You wouldn't think of anything. I mean, even podcasting. Podcasting, when it first started in maybe 1998 or something, right around there, 99. So that's kind of a cute idea. And remember, there was this platform called Blog Talk Radio, mm-hmm. where anybody could, put up a podcast or record something and put it up. And it never took off because user-generated content, audio content, is not that interesting. And
I think we confuse websites with podcasts too for a while. You go to a website and you be entertained, or it's there's been no leadership. There's no Walter Annenberg. There's nobody that had that vision to make TV Guide. That TV Guide was a very big enterprise. I mean, a lot of people think it was only something you grab on the supermarket shelf.
Right.
But it actually had ads, and every story was paid for. So it was a business, I mean, he was a brilliant man. What do we do with getting people together now because we're so separated?
Well, the problem is that, again, the business model was disrupted by the internet, and particularly the media business model was disrupted. The legendary, legacy media models were disrupted by social media. So that particularly Facebook. And today, Google and Facebook control the advertising in the internet. They have, 65% of all of the advertising, digital advertising. and people would be crazy to go anywhere else other than Google or Facebook, because if you serve ads on a website, for example, that's not Google or Facebook, they're so programmatically and real-time bidding, computer to computer, and the ads are served as the page is loading. So, but in order to bid on that available inventory, you have to know the demographics and the location and all of that, and you buy that data from third parties. So that publishers today only get about half of the money that's spent on the ad. They only get about half of it, and there's a tech tax of the other 50% to third-party databases and all of that. So that
they've become another industry. They've become more industries.
It's huge industry, huge.
Yeah.
But you don't have to pay that tech tax on Google or Facebook. And you can go directly to the consumer. Your money goes directly there. You can bid on it. And the cost per click model on Google, it ruined the rest of the media, because advertisers can go on Google, buy a search term, and only pay if somebody clicks on it.
Right.
And so, I mean, that's a really good deal for advertisers, rather than paying a cost per thousand and not knowing whether your ad had any effect or not. So the problem is really a business model in everything but the digital media.
So you teach this to young people.
Anybody? Yeah, I mean, I don't have to, it's interesting. I don't have to teach it to them. They know it. I mean, they know the internet. They know Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and all of this. They understand it.
Well, they don't know the economics of it without having some guidance. I mean, you must.
Well, it's interesting. They don't really understand the economics of it, right. And what the overall effects of being controlled by Google and Facebook, and the business model of newspapers and magazines being destroyed. They don't understand that.
It's of no concern, because you're coming to the game where you were born.
Yeah, exactly.
Just move along. Now, what's the responsibility then of the? I mean, we take on. There's no FCC. You don't have the Federal Communications Commission.
Well, that's a very interesting question. So that the big controversy now is, should Facebook be an arbiter of the truth, as Mark Zuckerberg says? When Jack Dorsey at Twitter decided to put a warning on one of Donald Trump's tweets that promoted violence, he was furious. And everybody said, well, what is Facebook going to do? And Facebook said, we're not arbiters of the truth. We're going to, we don't decide what should go up. Politicians should we're not going to correct them. Well, there was a revolt of people at Facebook. So what has happened in these big companies, media companies that are Google and Facebook, is that the people that run those companies and that are the engineers that create the content, create the code and the algorithms, etc., are millennials, which means they're between 26 and 40 years old. And millennials say, hey, I don't want you to sell face recognition software. I don't want you to, sell software to the government that's going to, keep immigrants out.
Or they would move back in with their parents if they wanted that kind of control.
That's right. Well, but there was a revolt in Facebook, and some of these young engineers and these young people who write the algorithms are saying, hey, you have to take a position. And so Zuckerberg changed his mind just a little bit. He said, well, what we'll do is we'll put, when Russia puts up something, we'll notify that who the sponsor was, who paid for it. And now I think he's reconsidering, what to do with the violent tweets, because Facebook has done unbelievable harm in Myanmar, in other places where, ethnic cleansing and genocide has been coordinated on Facebook. Now, is that good for society? So that
it becomes a question of what is freedom.
Exactly. Well, and the whole point, you're exactly right.
Let me move this for a minute. I just want to stop. I belong to the Friars, right? And I asked Charlie Callis, the comic who's passed, right. All these guys are, they were wonderful. We don't have that. We don't have that great entourage anymore of Bob Hope, and those guys are gone. But I said to Charlie, I asked him one night. I says, "What's comedy?" And he says, "Whatever makes you laugh."
Yes.
And I said, "Well, what's funny?" He says, "Whatever makes you laugh."
Right.
So so now we get into freedom. What's freedom? There you go, Charlie.
Well, and of course that's really an interesting question, the idea of freedom of speech. So what the conservatives, the right wing, say is, well, what's important is freedom of speech, and that you let people say whatever they want to say. And the left wing or the liberals say, yeah, you can have freedom of the speech up to a point. You can't holler fire in a burning theater, or etc. So there are some restrictions of freedom of speech. Hate speech should be restricted, inciting violence, etc. So there was a wonderful comment by Bonnie Weiss, who is a opinion columnist at the New York Times, and she said that at the Times, New York Times, the two sides of this argument are, the Times says their slogan is all the news that's fit to print. And there are some people that concentrate on the word all of the news. And there's another group that concentrate on the word fit, that's fit to print. What is fit to print? And so that is sort of the argument. And I think, this is only my view, that eventually Facebook will make the decision to decide what is fit. And that, exciting, encouraging violence, hate speech, that's no good anymore. And I think that they eventually will come to that, like Twitter did.
So, you have left wing and right wing, and I'm from Buffalo. A wing's a wing.
Well, and the great food, Buffalo, one of the great places in the world for food, chicken wings and sausage, where they had the street fair with all the ethnic food. That was wonderful.
Yeah, well, we still have that. I'm in Florida right now, but we're everywhere.
Yeah, exactly.
About you now. You're a wonderful teacher, and I've even learned. Can you believe it? And I think you're patient, and you are dedicated to giving people the truth, which is really the beginning of a good relationship. Otherwise, you don't have one. And I'm saying that because I know that's your character. But when you were in radio as management, and you were in Chicago, and you were in New York and NBC, you ran the big time, and AOL is a big time. This is all big time. Were you with Bob Pittman at MTV, or was that another?
No,
you didn't do the MTV part. But anyway,
I'll tell you a story about that.
Okay.
When we were at WNBC, I was the general manager, and Pittman was the program director.
Yeah.
And he really wanted to get into television. So he and another disc jockey, Lee Masters, who was afternoon drive time, they put together a TV show called Album Tracks. And I tried to sell this concept to the TV people. And I did. And Bob and Lee Masters went on with a show after Saturday Night Live's called Album Tracks. So, and it was a very successful, and it was a good show. And Neil Darrow, who was the general manager of WCBS TV, called me and said, "I want to interview Bob Pittman." And I said, "Great." So Bob went and talked to CBS. He also went to Warner Amex Satellite Entertainment Corporation. The executive vice president and the fellow that ran WASEC at the time was John Lack, who I'd hired at CBS in 1970. So John Lack called me and said, "I'd like to talk to Pittman." I said, "Sure." So he was offered a job at CBS as station manager of WCBS TV because he interviewed with the network, and the network said, "We want this guy. Let him go to the station for a year and then come up to the network." And he was offered a job by John Lack at Warner Amex Satellite Entertainment Corporation. Said, "I'll hire you, and I want you to create a music channel." So Bob came to me and said, "Well, which job should I take?" I said, "Well, of course, CBS. There's no doubt about it." Well, obviously, he made the right decision and went to WASEC and created MTV.
You know, you've done a lot for people too, and put people in place. I mean, you enjoy it, and you've done a great job of it. I'm not falsely flattering you, but you know, why didn't you promote yourself in some of these things? It's an American tradition, you know, to go up there. What stopped you from Charlie?
Okay, so I was at CBS 2 times in 1960 and then again in 67 through 71. And what I realized is that people that get ahead in the media are people that are really good at selling up. A manager's job is to manage up, manage down, and manage across. But in the media, which is generally run by autocrats who want power, that's why they get in the media. It's the same reason people get in politics. So what they do is that they want to have loyalty and want people that are just like them and compliment them. So this ability to manage up, to sell up, is absolutely the reason people get promoted in the media, at least in the big media companies. And I've seen this over and over and over and over again. Not necessarily the smartest, not necessarily the most talented. So I always, said, "Hey, I want the people I hire, I want them to get ahead. I want them to, do well." And I, as a manager, I always looked at myself as a coach or a teacher, not really as somebody that was trying to, get ahead, because I didn't enjoy the politics of managing up. I enjoyed the teaching and the coaching of the people that I work with. So it's just.
And you even fired Imus, if I recall.
Well, when we went to WNBC, I said to Bob, "What do you want to do with the station?" He said, "Well, we're going to take it to the top 40 to compete against WABC because that's where the biggest audience was."
Right.
And so we said we need a whole new staff. So we fired the entire staff. Imus was one of them. Cousin Brucey was another one. So we just had to do a complete change, and we did.
Well, I'm not mad at you for not firing me. I have a great regard for you, Charlie. You're great. You're just a wonderful man. I hope you don't edit this out, because I want you to be flattered. by an industry that owes you a lot, and I don't see you on a stage. I don't see you holding a statue. I don't see a lot of signs behind you. I see a very wonderful gentleman who's got a good heart and who's interested, as you say, curious. And your reward is always to see other people do well. So that you're not even giving back. You're just giving. You're not giving. You can't give back something you didn't have.
Right, exactly. Well, Joey, I think that one of the reasons that we connect is because you're the same person I am.
Yeah.
And you're very curious. You're very smart, and you ask smart questions about people. You do your research on people, and you want to learn too. You want to learn from the people that you have on you talk to. So, and I think your talent, and of course you want to do well, and you want the ratings to be well, but when you weren't in the radio any longer, you kept doing what you do. You have to do what you do. You have to. I mean, there's just no choice. You have to do that. And so I feel as a teacher, this is what I have to do.
I learned from the Long Island Jews, and the saying that I follow with that is, so there shouldn't be a total loss.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
I'm so happy to know you and to see you being healthy, and you got a great wife. I could say that if you don't mind.
You're alive.
Both of you guys are healthy, and thank God. And you're also active. I mean, you do a lot of things that we don't talk about, with people and politics. I think you have a good heart for that.
Well, I try to make a difference if I can.
Now, I have a question. Okay,
Yeah.
And then what I would like to know, two things. First of all, where do you come from?
I was born in Chicago, and when I was 3, we moved to Battle Creek, Michigan. And when I was 10, we moved to Washington, D.C., Alexandria, because my father this was 1942, and my father was in the Pentagon. He was in G2 intelligence in the Pentagon in World War II. And so I stayed in Washington from the time I was 10, and I went to prep school there, St. Albans, and then graduated from there and went to Dartmouth and became an adult.
Well, it's that all-black school, Morristown. What's it called? The all-black school, where Martin Luther King graduated from, and Oprah and Spike Lee. Is it more? I'm close. Begins with an M. What is it? Anyway, there's a white kid that only one white kid. He broke through. He said he wanted to go to that, and not for any particular praise. And there's a little documentary on Vice TV. Did you ever watch Vice?
No.
No, that's an interesting. There's a lot of offbeat channels. I mean,
Yeah,
I'm not promoting anything. I'm just saying, I try to figure out what I'm supposed to do. Now, that's my other question leading up to it. How are we ever going to get anybody together again, where we all look at the same thing, maybe at the same time, or besides a stadium?
I think that we are getting together over the murder of George Floyd. I think that you look at crowds in Seattle and other areas, and Washington, D.C., and they're young people, and they're white and black and people of color. And I think that this is bringing us together. Now, to the us, it's not going to bring the South together. Georgia clearly screwed up their election in favor of white people and Republicans. They didn't want the Democratic Fulton County to vote or blacks to vote. So it's not bringing everybody together. It won't bring the South up. The racism in the South won't stop for years and years. But I think that, as a country, we are coming together. The majority is coming together because of this. And I think this is a turning point. It's a turning point for the media. It's a turning point for race relations. And the very fact that now on the table of discussion are issues that we couldn't have believed would be on the table for discussion years ago. The idea of defunding the police, the idea of shutting down prisons. I mean, my God, if you'd have mentioned this 5 years ago, people would have thought you were crazy.
I did. I went to the documentary on Rikers Island.
Yeah.
And I fought for that, and I kept getting shut down. And they did not shut it down.
No.
And that's a hellhole. I mean, you talk about waterboarding. Why would we treat another person like that anytime at any time? And look at what my wristband is. I don't know if you ever saw it. It's NYPD. So I'm a law-abiding citizen,
right?
I don't believe in hurting another person to just because. I don't believe in punishment on the spot anyway, no matter what. I don't even do it with my kids. I don't believe in that. It's just me, and I think the concept of overdoing everything, of being mean-spirited. There's so much in it. It's not one thing. It's so much. It's dark.
You put your finger on it, Joey. This notion of the way that you get people to change their behavior is to spank them, is to punish them, and to dominate them. On the other hand, as a father, and I know as a father, I have 10 children, 8 my children and 2 stepchildren. And I learned over the years that punishment doesn't work.
No.
What it does is it represses behavior, and so they'll continue the behavior, they just won't show it to you. The way to change people is to reward them.
And modeling.
Model behavior and reward good behavior. And so we're going to have to change the way we look at law enforcement, prisons, etc. And it's got to happen, because the authoritarian, fascist point of punishing people and dominating people, it doesn't work anymore.
You're going to love this. There's a guy named George DeLeon, who was the father of therapeutic community from years ago. He wrote the book on it. And he's very modest. He lives in New York, but he works in the prison system. So what he's been doing behind everybody's back, and it started in California, which is a little bit more liberal in their idealism. He went to, I forget which prison it was. I think it was Fulham. Anyway, I always want to say, Fordham, because of the Jesuits. That's a prison. Just joking. Don't get crazy. So he went to Folsom, and he convinced the warden to start a men's group by having the warden assign the men to a group. And the men, what they got out of it is they got free time, and they were out from behind bars, and they had an extra place to go at night, for a meeting. And they all started to work on each other. And it wasn't a Bible study, he didn't form a religious group. He formed a men's group so they could match their stories with each other. And finally, after the breakdown and the association, they became so good that other prisoners wanted to join in or start their own group. And that's the work that he's done. See, that's the work that people do that's not announced.
I agree. And of course, the documentary on putting Shakespeare in prisons was inspiring.
Yeah,
that was wonderful. So treating prisoners like people, and give them art is that's the way to change them.
Also, I want to mention my friend Robert Fletcher does social art, and he is not celebrated for that, but he is also probably the best watercolor painter in the country. I know you like art. I'll send you some of his work. It's
please, I'd love it.
Simple. Simple but great. But what was thinking of with this is they want to get rid of Gone with the Wind now because it celebrates the Confederacy. I just don't want them to screw around with Song of the South because I liked Uncle Remus. Now there's a black guy that took in the white kids on a plantation and taught them what love is, love and caring. That should never not be a good film to watch, because that has a wonderful message to it. That, zippity doo dah and all that other stuff is animation, but it's a great message. And these are black people who take time with the white community, even though they have their own issues, but they put their issues aside because the greater purpose is love. That's what I got out of it.
That's interesting. There was a whole controversy about the Song of the South, and Disney, pulled it from distribution because many black people were complaining about, Uncle Remus. So
yeah.
When HBO Max, where they're the ones that pulled Gone with the Wind off of their offerings, so I subscribed to HBO Max, and the first thing I did was watch for the 100th time Casablanca.
Oh yeah, and also then you would be mad at the Nazis.
Yeah, well, that's right. So I watched Casablanca.
Yeah,
and I realized in watching that Sam, the piano player, he was a stereotype of a submissive black person.
Yeah.
He called Humphrey Bogart, who played Rick Blaine, he called him Mr. Richard.
Yeah. And
if you think about it today, that wouldn't go. You couldn't do that today. And so, but was really interesting because when I first saw that movie, when it came out, and when I was in college and after that, I always loved that movie. But now my sensitivity has become a little bit more sensitive, and to look at it and say, oh my God, Sam, who's a great character, is a stereotype of a submissive Negro, black person.
Well, Green Book was good last year. That won an Academy Award. That was a wonderful book about traveling.
Yeah, right.
Stay at hotels if you were black because you weren't allowed. I talked to Frankie Valli about that yesterday because I was on tour with them, and we were turned away from the Berkeley Carteret Hotel in Asbury because we had black people acts with us.
Sure,
One was Benny King. They were all big.
Right.
They didn't want us to stay there. We were ruining their image. Come on. Of course,
what did he say?
Well, Frankie went inside and beat them up back then. He was a star. And
great.
Guys. So we promised that we would behave. That's like ridiculous. You have to make a deal with them. We behave. What does that mean?
Yeah.
Comply. Does it mean subservient? What does it mean? It means.
We think about what in 1938 and 39, what Benny Goodman had to go through with Lionel Hampton and Teddy Wilson, these fabulous musicians that were black. And what they had to go through, it had to be horrible.
Well, Dinah Washington was a great example in Vegas. She had to use the back door. But the best example of all was Ella Fitzgerald, because Frank Sinatra would kick someone's ass if they bothered her.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we have had, but that shouldn't be the case. Where are we? Where's our? It's not color of skin. It's money. It's education and poverty. Those are the things. Teach our children. Teach money. I wish I learned money.
Exactly. Well,
I want to credit you today before we sign off here. You've been very gracious with your time. Unless you want to say something, go ahead.
Except that I'm delighted to talk to you. It's always a pleasure.
Oh, thank you, Charlie. Charles Warner. Now we're going to tell everybody where you go, and then I want to give you a cap on this thing. So where do we go if we want to The new school is something you have to sign up for and join and go to school, right?
Yeah. Well, you can go to mediacurmudgeon.com, and I post weekly, sometimes twice a week, my take on the current situation in the media. So mediacurmudgeon.com.
And where else?
That's it.
That's all? Okay.
Yep.
I want to thank your father. He was in the intelligence corps.
Yep, yep.
And you inherited it.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. I wasn't a good student, but I think my curiosity kept me going.
I love you, Charlie. Charlie Warner.
Love you too, Joey.
Let a smile be your umbrella, but don't get a mouthful of rain.